So I'm creating a building guide here for some new players. This is a trick that I used for building when I didn't know what anything was, and so I'm hoping that it'll help make building a little bit easier when you're new. So you go to Gods, go to the god that you want to do, and I'm going to use Nike as an example. Go down to Item Builder, and what I've already got built here already is something that I got from SmiteFire.com. Great website, lots of resources. You can go there, pick the god you want, make sure you're in the correct season. We're currently in Season 5. If anybody views this later, it might be a later season. Make sure you get the correct season because items change a lot even within the season. So this build was from SmiteFire. They'll tell you how to build, what to build. They have full guides for how to use the character, what combos to use your abilities on. It's great. Built this from that. Really all there is to say about that for now. Starter items, you don't need 4 of them. The first slot, I actually put a starter item in. Attacker's Blessing for Warriors. Guardian's Blessing for Guardians. Hunters for Hunters. Mages for Mages. But Assassins, I would only build Assassin's Blessing if you're a jungler in Conquest. If you don't play Conquest at all, there's no point to this. Even building these, I'm going to put in Attacker's Blessing for Nike just to have it. But if you build it, it's a low-cost item that gives you a lot of benefits, but you will have to turn off your auto build. Since I'm targeting this build guide at brand new players, you might not be comfortable turning off your auto build yet, so I'm not going to actually include it in the build, but I would put it up here so when you are comfortable, you can redo your build, take off your last item, put this in your first item, and then during the game, when you get your 5th item built, you turn off your build, sell this item, and put on your 6th item. So that's starter items. Lots of power for low cost. These next 3 slots, because I don't need 4 starter items, even if I was using them, I use items that I almost always go in and build. First one, Brawler's Beat Stick, is anti-heal. And so anytime you've got another god you're going up against that has lifesteal or as a healer like Aphrodite or Chang'e, for 8 seconds after you hit them with an attack, they'll lose 20% of their healing. Very effective. Second one is another anti-heal item, Pestilence. Just by being in the area of them, you'll reduce their healing by 20%. These two things together reduce them by 40%. They're very effective. For a warrior, if I see a bunch of healing, I might build both of those. And those would replace items that are already here. Pestilence's magical defense, it would replace Genji's Garb. So you'd get anti-heal, you would lose cooldown reduction, so you wouldn't be able to use your abilities as often. This would replace the Crusher, so I'd be getting anti-heal, and I would be losing damage for 2 seconds after hitting them with an ability to get this. These 2 items are almost identical. It's just this gives you a little bit more advantage if you're not going against a healer. Third item that I build up here, I place up here but don't build, I should say, is Magi's Cloak. Magi's Cloak gives you a purple bubble around you every, I believe it's 70 seconds, and it's basically another purification beads. Every 70 seconds, if you're hit with a hard crowd control, it'll take your purple bubble around you, and you don't need to use your relic purification beads. Gives you a little bit of physical defense, a little bit of magical defense. Not a great defensive item, but it's a great crowd control item. So I always put it up there so I can have it. Now, for the rest of the damage and defensive abilities, these are alternate items that I might want to put in. You're going to start with boots. You almost always start with boots, even if they're not your first item. Always build them first or second item if you're going to rush an item. But they are very low cost and they give you a lot of benefits. So always, always, always buy boots. This is cooldown, this is health, cooldown, damage, and Mantle of Discord is an item that gives you both magical and physical protections. And if you go below 30%, it'll send out a shockwave which stuns gods around you. I always build it as an alternative defensive item, even if I don't build it. because it's just that good for a single item. It only takes up a single slot and gives you magical and physical defense. It's a really good item. So my alternative damage items that I'm going to put on here are Jolton's Wrath, which is a high power item, a little bit of penetration, and gives you mana and cooldown reduction. If, for instance, I took this off and put that on for anti-heal, this would give me back my cooldown reductions if I built that instead of Brawler's Beatstick, if I only built one anti-magic item. This is something I could swap in to get more cooldown if I lost either the chest pieces. Second item I'm going to build is Hasten Katana for melee attack gods. Hasten Katana, every time you hit somebody with your basic attack, in addition to its stats of power, penetration, and movement speed, it also makes you immune to slows while you're hitting a god with your basic, so you can kind of stick to them better, and it makes it easier for melee gods to stay with gods they're basic attacking. If you never use your basic attacks, this doesn't do you any good. But for a melee god like Nike, yeah, this is a nice item. Final one that I'm going to build here is Masamune. This gives me some more movement speed, health, and physical power, and if I'm surrounded, the more gods I'm surrounded by, the more defense I have. Defensive slash attack item. If I need more defense, but I can't go without at least one attack item, I could get a little bit of both there. This next piece for defense, what I'm going to do is, right now this is kind of built for a cooldown, so I can spam my abilities more often. I'm going to build two items that are more team-oriented and put them down here. Sovereignty, this is an aura item. If your team is a bunch of squishies, so mages and hunters and assassins, and you want to give them a little bit more physical defense, instead of getting your cooldown, you could build this instead and help them. You get physical defense, and they also get a little bit of physical defense. Same type of thing is Heartward Amulet, but for magical. Here it is. Aura item, allied gods within 70 units get their magical protections increased by 15 and their MP5 increased by 20. So it gives them mana and it gives them magical protections. So it helps them out a little bit. So these are two items that I would flip in for these two to help the team. I'm not going to build them initially because Nike has a passive that helps the team to begin with. Now these are only defensive items. If I was playing a hunter or an assassin, because we're in the physical build, I might do another one of these videos for magical to just go over some magical items and alternatives. I would actually build something different for hunter and assassin. For physical, Void Shield or Shifter Shield gives you a little bit of physical protection, but also gives you power. So if maybe you don't need as much protection and you want to just go more power, but you want to have a little bit of protection, these two will help. Shifter Shield gives you more power, less protection. Void Shield gives you health, which is always nice for defense, physical protection, and physical power. Usually I'd build Void Shield because if I'm going to build a defensive item, I want it to have more defense. And if it gives me a little bit of offense, that's cool too. The magical version of that is either Runic Shield or Ansil. Runic Shield's the one you almost always buy. Ansil will silence for 1 second a magical god that did used a magical ability on you. So for really bursty gods, especially mages like Scylla and Hebo, if you need another second to get your dash off and get out of there because you're just getting burst down, I'd build that. Any other time I'd build Runic Shield. But again, I wouldn't put these on a Nike build because you're far more defensive. But for hunters and assassins, that's where I'd use those as my physical and magical defense. Or more likely I would use Mantle of Discord, so I'd only use one item for my defense instead of having to use 2 slots for defense on an assassin or hunter. But they're great options to have down here just to flip them in if an enemy team is really got a strong physical or magical god. The last slot I'm going to do is I'm going to put in Toxic Blade. Now the whole point of doing your build like this is when you come into the game and you start the game, you're going to have a first page that says custom build. And all the stuff that we've put on this is on that custom build. So when you push left and go to the store, if I want Toxic Blade, which is another anti-heal item, Toxic Blade plus the other two anti-heals, if all three of those are built, that'll give you 80% anti-heal. So their healing is reduced by 80% if you hit them for 8 seconds. If all three items, Pestilence, Brawler's Beatstick, and Toxic Blade, are built. So I'll put that on, but because I built this, if I go into the store when I first spawn in, hit left on the D-pad to bring up the store, click Toxic Blade but don't click Build, but go over to Wing Blade, this is 20% crowd control reduction. If you're getting rooted a lot, if there's a Kuba Carne who puts you to sleep, and you just want to reduce the amount of time that you're stunned, this is an item that you could go to without leaving that first page just by having this in this slot. When you go into the game, the whole idea of doing this build is to have 95% of the things that you would build on one page. You have your auto build for 6 items that as long as the game's going the way it should, you don't ever have to turn off. But if you get to your boots and you look across at the team and you realize that they've got somebody with tons of heal, maybe they've got a Baron 70 and an Afro. Baron has his healing ability, Afro is a healer. You might want to change your build and switch in some anti-heal items in place of the Crusher and Genji's Garb. You might recognize that right away. You might get to your second item and realize the game's not going the way you want it to, and one god is destroying you, and you might want to build an item that has more defense against them. So this gives you options to change without having to look through every single item in Smite if you're unfamiliar with the items. Trying to find them can take a long time and get you stuck in the menus, in the store, and not out playing the game, and that's tough. For relics, what I do is I put the relics here in the custom build, but I don't actually build any of these. That way when you get into a game, you can select the one that you want. The game won't automatically put it in, you won't have to try to delete it, accidentally turn off your auto build, all that kind of crap. If you do it this way, if you put them in with their level 0 basic version and then select them when you actually get into the game from that first page, this gives you options. Aegis Amulet and Purification Beads, if you just built those two every time, you wouldn't be wrong. But sometimes you want something different. For Warriors, I like Reflect. Thorns is Damage Reflect. And Meditation I like to have as an option. Gives you a little bit of health and a little bit of mana. Early game, that mana especially can be useful, and the health and mana can get you out of being killed sometimes if you're running away. The later in game you go, the less effective this relic is though, so it's not a must-buy by any stretch. Consumables, especially if you're new, buy the green one, buy the blue one. Don't worry too much about it. These will refill every time you go back to base, and so you don't have to keep paying for basic health and mana potions. These two are both wards. I put them here because in any game mode but Arena, wards can be very useful. Conquest, they're a must, so having them where you can access them quickly is really useful, so they're in my build too. So this in general is a way that I found when I was new to be able to build, to take a build from somebody on Smitefire who knew more about the gods and how to build than me, use it, and when things weren't going great in a match, turn it off and adjust to 95% of the items that I would ever want to get to. And this, when all the squares are populated, that gives you a lot of different options doing it this way. Hope that's helpful, makes it a little bit easier to not be so scared to turn off your auto build and build situational, specific by match and by opposing god items. Thank you.